All right, everybody, welcome to another edition of What's What BR. Today we have three special guests with us from FRANU. If anybody who doesn't know what FRANU is, you'll find out very shortly. First, we have Dr. Holland. How are you today?
Doing great, thank you.
Awesome. Then we have Kaylin down here, and my bottom left. It changes for everybody depending on where you are. But how are you, Kaylin?
I'm swell.
Swell. Oh, that's
Yeah.
a new one. So, and the we also have Quentin. How are you, sir?
Doing well. I'm groovy.
Groovy. There we swell, groovy, and fine. That's we're gonna make it today. Well, look, I guess to dive in, there's a lot of history and a lot of people may not know. There's been a lot of Fran U. Let's just start there. Darton, you've got the highest title of all of us on here. So tell us. We'll let you go first and tell us. What is Fran U? I know what it is, but for anybody who has no idea.
Sure. FRANU is the nickname, really, for Franciscan Missionaries of Our Lady University. And since that name is such a mouthful, and since the students are so clever, when the name was changed from Our Lady of the Lake College to Franciscan Missionaries of Our Lady University, and that was the choice of our founders, the sisters, the Franciscan Missionaries of Our Lady, the university, of course, is their namesake. And when they changed the name to match their congregation, the URL that we were able to get for our website and email was franu.edu. So the students just started calling us FRANU. And, you just don't get in the way of students. It's kind of like when you have a campus and you don't put the sidewalks down until you see where the students kill the grass. It's the same idea. So we went with them and branded as FRANU. It's not the official name, as I said. Sometimes we shorten it to Franciscan, but that can get confused with the 24 other Franciscan universities and colleges in the country, particularly the Franciscan University out in Steubenville. So we don't go necessarily by Franciscan, but by FRANU, because it's just simply easier than saying Franciscan Missionaries of Our Lady University.
.edu would be a really long name. I can
Yes.
imagine having to type that every time I had to email somebody.
Right. So we thank the students for that nickname because it caught on, and we decided we'd run with it.
There we go. And how long? So as Fran U is the new nickname, but Our Lady of the Lake Medical College, wasn't that was the first?
It was Our Lady of the Lake School of Nursing, and it was a hospital-based nursing school.
Mm-hmm.
But then in the 80s, in order to be accredited, the school was separately incorporated. And then they started adding allied health professions and moved from a diploma school to degree nursing. And that became then Our Lady of the Lake College of Nursing and Allied Health. And then in order to really enhance the degrees and do justice to what we call the Catholic intellectual tradition, we had to strengthen the core of the curriculum. Mm-hmm. And so that's when we added arts and sciences so that the nurses and the allied health professionals would be well-rounded, would understand sort of the purpose and other important aspects behind their technical education. And that's when we became the Our Lady of the Lake College, period. And then we started adding graduate degrees, clear on up through the doctoral degrees. And so with that level of complexity, we became a university. And so we changed our name to match that. And of course, there's colleges in the country that have university status, Boston College, College of the South. Those are, but because of their historic names, they choose to keep, the Holy Cross College out in Worcester. It's clearly a university, but because of that historic name, they choose to keep their name college. We, however, said, you know what? We have a college or a school of nursing, a school of health professions, and a school of arts and sciences. We're a university. So in 2016 is when we started the process of renaming and rebranding.
There we go. That, and you mentioned, is that somewhere along the lines, these servant leaders, and that's the mission, was to continue to grow, and expand, I guess the offering is the third word.
Offerings, right? Well, we actually, thanks to Quentin and the rest of the board of trustees, we actually rewrote the mission statement we had for many years, because we sort of, as I shared the history, we sort of morphed from being primarily a healthcare organization that did teaching. Now we are an educational organization with a special niche in healthcare. And so we really had to present a mission statement that was clearly an educational mission statement, and one that did justice to our Franciscan and Catholic heritage. So we did compose a new mission statement for the university, and essentially it is to educate and form Franciscan servant leaders of all faiths. And we say of all faiths because Franciscan doesn't necessarily require one to be Catholic. To be Franciscan is to have a certain lifestyle, and one that is exemplary of St. Francis. And we have our core values that describe that lifestyle. And of course, it's all founded in the gospel message. But as I said, to live the Franciscan lifestyle does not necessarily require one to be Catholic. But we certainly don't apologize that we're a Catholic university, and we also have in our mission statement a very clear statement of faith and fidelity to the teaching authority of the church.
Well, that's awesome. So I'm assuming with all those changes, things are good. I would assume, growth is happening for you guys, and that's obviously what you want, but also, when you're competing against other major universities that we have, in our area, to have that, from what I heard, numbers are up, for you guys.
Numbers are up, but I have to say the shape of the enrollment for me, and for what I try to explain to our board, is the shape of the enrollment is far more important than the size. Mm-hmm. Because as many private institutions are growing in headcount, they're losing net tuition revenue, which then doesn't support their operations. That's happening because they're discounting tuition, and they're doing a lot of interesting financial somersaults to get their headcounts. We take the model, though, of a more low tuition, low discount. So we don't forego revenue, but we do supplement students' tuition with private scholarships that might gap what they get in state aid and federal aid. So when we say we shape the enrollment, we want to make sure that we have the kinds of students that we can best serve. Now, we're not going to admit only ringers. We're always going to bring in students for whom it might be a risk, and we're going to have to support them more than other students. But we are not going to admit students who don't really have a reasonable chance of being successful, even with the supportive environment that we provide. So that's part of it. And quality is, for us, the most important. And then if we, can attract more students and can raise enough scholarship dollars to support those who might not otherwise be able to attend, then we grow. But for us, size really is determined by the need in the community, not how many students we want to enroll in, because more students means more tuition. No, if there's a need in the community, then we will do what we can to meet that need. And if that means that we need to recruit more students, we will. And if those students need more support, then we'll have to invest in that support.
And that's like a perfect, I was sitting here trying to think of how I was going to move to I had this segue I've got to kind of work us through, and I'm kind of blowing through the creativity, side of it. But, you speak of a need in the community. We all know where we are, right now in these COVID times that we live. You guys filled a need, from what I'd read, an early graduation, in April to get some of this workforce, mm-hmm. Into the hospitals. You mind tell me a little more, is there more to it? Because I think it's also in November, as well. We're able
Yes.
to push some people out.
Well, when COVID hit, we did what good Franciscans do, and we adjusted to meet the needs of our community, which means our faculty and our students. And it was not ideal, but we did a beautiful pivot seamlessly to an online environment. Had some adjustments to do, but we didn't miss a beat. And in fact, Kaylin is part of the class. Well, you're graduating um, in November. Is that right, Kaylin?
I am actually graduating in May, so I hope you graduate me earlier in April as well.
Oh, okay. So Kaylin was among the students that had to do that shift and try to figure out how we're going to get our clinical experiences in a socially distanced environment and where COVID is so, such a high risk and all of that. But the class ahead of her, full year ahead of her, graduated in the middle of April, a full month earlier, 6 weeks maybe earlier than they were planning to graduate, because we were getting calls saying we're understaffed and we need these nurses. Mm-hmm. So it meant they had to agree to double up on their work. The faculty had to agree to work twice as hard. And we had to make sure that it was done in a really rigorous and highly focused way, because they had to pass their licensing exams. So it's not like you could skip any material or gloss over anything. They had to literally get twice as much work done and learn twice as much material in those last few weeks as they normally would. And the same thing with our respiratory therapy students, the bachelor's in respiratory therapy, they did the same thing. And then they had promises of employment well before they graduated, and they went immediately to work as soon as they received their diplomas. And
pass your boards, and
yes,
on the way in,
well,
stop in, pass your
they
boards,
can
and don't even
prior
go home.
to
Just
the
go
boards,
to
it's pending their boards, but they 100% of the students pass their boards on the first go. So when you get 100% pass rate in these licensing exams, that's a big deal, especially when they had to double up on the material, learn twice as much material in half the time. That was very impressive. And I've taught for many years, and my hat goes off to the faculty and to the students.
That's amazing. I've talked to a number of different schools, and just, I think it was things like March 13th, was that the infamous day where it was like a Friday maybe, and it was like, everybody go home, take the kids home, and everybody go figure it out. And I talk to everybody, and I always ask the question, and nobody ever has, the answer. But we all have, in our IT worlds, a disaster plan. If, we lose power, we have this plan. I've yet to talk with anybody on this show or anybody that had like the pandemic plan. It's like, how do we immediately turn around? Like, if there was a pandemic, what are we going to do? How do we flip this whole game on its head and figure it out all over the weekend and start on Monday? Right. It sounds like you guys got, pretty daggone close.
We had an advantage. We do have a very talented instructional technology team, and we're in the online space already. Mm-hmm. So, and we have a very creative faculty who are so mission centered. No matter how they're going to teach, they're going to make sure that it's done in a Franciscan way, which means that it's highly, highly relationship based. And it's hard to do that in an online setting, but they figured out ways to, use different kinds of apps to create engaged environments. And some are better at it than others. But we had said, right, there we no asynchronous kind of learning, where it's voice over PowerPoint and there's no real time back and forth. We had one faculty think that would be okay, and we had to say, no, that's not how we roll at Franciscan. So you can't plug and play. It's as if you're in the classroom, and you got to work that much harder to create that relationship with the students. But they did it, and my hat goes off to them. We're very, very proud of their accomplishments.
We had a rule that I ran in our office that was, whenever we had meetings, and we've always used Zoom in the office, but the rule that we always had was, if your camera's not on, you're not in the meeting. So it doesn't count. If I don't care if you're logged in, because I don't know if I don't see you and you're sitting there on mute, I don't know if you're on the other end of this or, what's happening. And you talk about adapting. You talk about adapting. I talked to a buddy of mine was saying how he just thought it was interesting. He saw an ad this wasn't here, but for a hardware store. And in the ad, they were FaceTime shoppers. And he called them up and he was like, how does this work? FaceTime, shopping. And they go, oh, well, we give you the number of one of our associates. And this is when everything was shut down. They're like, and they just walk around holding the phone and let you see everything on FaceTime. And if you want something, grab it, and he's like, I ended up spending $300. I just wanted to see how it worked, but it was like, that's the ingenuity of people going, hey, I've got to keep my people working. I got to keep my business. What else? People can't come in. He said they all had iPhones and they started running ad campaigns, and that's what they were doing, that they were FaceTime, shoppers. So I think out of all of this, when the dust settles, I think we're all going to find that, in the end, this pushed a lot of us on technology and us to do things a little bit differently that ultimately will help us, in the long run. So if my notes are correct, you've got, we're 2020, which I think everybody's pretty much done with at this point. If we could just, my daughter says on New Year's, we're all supposed to scream like Jumanji to get out of the game or something at midnight. It's not a happy New Year. We're all screaming Jumanji. We're going to be done. But 2023, right, is, it's 100 years for you guys, right? That is, I don't even know where you would start. We're at 30, over here, and I'm just in shock and awe. But 100 years of trying to go, we didn't have internet, we didn't have book. This is completely another, world. What's next? Any secrets that you want to share?
The real focus of the university now is and it's always been to some degree, but we really are focusing on our partnerships with other educational organizations at the high school and the community college level, and with businesses, employers, to do our part to try to fulfill the strategic plan for higher education in the state, prosper Louisiana, and to help to grow the educational level of Louisianans in the areas that we're qualified to do so, especially those that are high need, which of course isn't nearly all of our majors, because we only offer programs when there's a need. So we really are focusing on partnerships that will help to grow the workforce in those areas of greatest need, but in a way that's very different than, say, the industrial model of the land-grant public institutions, because our first focus is not the economic machine, but the student, the individual student. But it's through the growth and the development and the fulfillment of the students' God-given potential that then they contribute to the advancement of the state. So we really are a private institution with a public purpose, to serve the public good. So we really want to see, all right, talk to the employers and say, how can you grow your own? And how can we help you? Are you willing to invest in your employees such that you don't spend that same money and more out trying to recruit folks? We know it's difficult to bring people from out of state. And I came from out of state. Quentin came from out of state to come to Louisiana and work. We know that's difficult. We have to improve that. Well, the way to do it is to grow our own citizenry and really become more sophisticated in our ability to use the resources we have and, make the whole bigger than the sum of parts. Did that make sense?
Yeah, no. And you're saying resources, and I was just thinking, like, do you see some of this? I think the answer is yes, but just in my mind, obviously for higher education, and education as a whole, cost is, it's a big factor, but it would seem like that now that we're like years ago, like 2 years ago, I was given like an award with Zoom for like top 10% of the Zoom users. I used it everywhere in other businesses, but for the life of me, I couldn't get anybody in Baton Rouge. Like I'd be like, hey, can you want to jump on a Zoom? And they'd be like, like just nobody knew what it was. Now, like I told somebody the other day, I will never drive downtown for a 15-minute meeting, again. We're getting on Zoom. I'm not fighting. I'm not spending 2 hours to go talk to somebody for 15 minutes. Now that that's accepted, and almost, it's socially acceptable, do you see, like, it would seem like you could have so many more guest lectures, or so many experts, could come in. It's like, hey, we don't need to get you on a plane. You don't have to come out here. We don't have to pay all that. It's like, we just want an hour of your time, sitting down behind a screen, and we want to ask. It seemed like that would be a major shift, that like, that's okay. And then not only that, one of the things that, we love with Zoom, is that we record it and we can go back and watch it again. And it's like, I have always been horrible at taking notes. Now with Zoom, I don't even pretend to take notes anymore. It's like, I'll just go back and rewatch the game film again if I have to, and see what happened. But is that stuff you see, or you guys doing? Is it
already happening, where our face-to-face classes, for example, have a high-tech camera system so that if students are quarantined, they are still participating in the class at home while the face-to-face class is going on. They are recorded. So if a student is, misses the lecture, they can, they can get it. It's got something called capture lecture or something like that. My provost knows more about the specifics, but it sort of opened the door for more fluidity between the remote and face-to-face environment. So teaching is teaching. The difference is, do you use a blackboard or an overhead projector or a nifty computer projector to show your materials? And do you do it in front of a class or in front of a camera, or both? So it's just adds more options to, I guess, to expand your audience.
And you speaking of expanding the audience, that's kind of where I was going to go. It seems like I remember you could, I don't know why, I never understood the term, but it was like you could audit a class, or you could go see a class and just kind of sit through it and kind of decide, do I want to do this? Do I not want to do this? It would seem like this is a perfect opportunity where, maybe a professor's like, hey, I nailed that lecture, put that one in the books if somebody wants to see if this is right for them. This is something that they don't have to come sit in the classroom for. You could kind of archive this and pull it all together and say, look, if you're not sure, come tour the campus, come talk to us. We're nice people. But then, hey, we'll send you some links. It's 3 hours worth of classes, watch them at your leisure and tell us if you think this is something that you'd be interested in, or if you think you could keep up with, that kind of thing.
So for some of those purposes, that's really, those are really good ways of using the technology. But I want to be very, very clear in saying that online is not a panacea, and especially for Franciscan education, it is not the best way to teach. Can we get by? Yes. Do we get the very best outcomes? The research shows no. And now we are seeing that some of our students are not performing as well as those who are in a face-to-face environment. And so we are doing some work to make sure that even in a socially distanced way, we get enough space. So it means we have to go off campus to find some additional space so that we can be face-to-face with these students in a distance orientation, because we know that they will do better when you can look at them eyeball to eyeball and breathe in the same air, but 6 feet apart, of course. So
I get it. No, that's
so we will insist on doing that, but it takes some more resources to get that done.
yeah. No, I don't. My daughter's school for some reason thought it was a good idea. Like they sent Latin home, and they're like, "Brandon, teach her Latin." I'm like, "I don't know English, and how do you want me to teach her Latin?" And I can't read the stuff, you know. So, and then it was like, and then I talked to one of them. They were like, "Well, here, we'll help you and do this." And I'm like, I don't know what she's saying, if it's right or wrong. You know, like I'm just like, okay, you said a bunch of, mess to me. I don't know. You've got to have some of that interaction.
Right.
You know, I'm as much, I love the tech, I love that we're able to, all sit here and do this, show right now. That's great. But, I don't want to just sit there and watch videos for 2 years and all of a sudden somebody go, drop you in a hospital and say, hey, look, I watched a bunch of, it's almost like that. I stayed at the Holiday Inn last night. I watched 2 years worth of video. It's not the same.
No, and of course our clinical and laboratory experiences must be face to face. We did do some in the early part of COVID. We did some online simulations. Kaylin's more qualified than I to talk a little bit about that. I don't know how well that went. And then there's very expensive ways to do testing and proctoring testing online. That's another, that was another challenge, but we got it done. It costs more money than being face-to-face proctoring. And some of the labs were even done virtually, and not ideal, but we got them done.
That's so. Kaylin, tell me, what brought you, to FRANU? We've heard a whole lot about it, but obviously you had the choice to go everywhere. You're paying them, so not them paying you to be there. So you obviously want to be there. What was the story there?
So I'm originally from Chauvin, Louisiana. If you're not familiar, there's one bayou, 2 roads. You're either going down the bayou or up the bayou. And so there was a lot of choices for me. And I really didn't know where I wanted to go or who I wanted to be. But I knew that God had a big plan for me. He gave me 2 functioning hands and 1 big heart. So why not help as many people as I can? It was actually my first career fair. I was walking through all the tables. All my friends were like, ooh, LSU or UL. And I was like, yeah. And so I walked by this table, and I started FRANU in 2016. So it was Our Lady of the Lake at the time. So I stopped at the lake's table, and it was just like an immediate connection. It was like we were both burning a fire, and it just became a bonfire. Like it felt so good. It felt so right. And so I went to my first little open house, and the lady that I met, her name, I don't know if I can name drop, but she became my advisor for the university. And I still to this day, I consider her a friend. I made plenty of friends and family members out of my mentors and staff that I met at FRANU. So, FRANU was an easy choice. I was getting a great education. I was making a home out of FRANU. I was making a family out of FRANU. And to this day, I will be anyone's guinea pig to help out FRANU and recruit as many people as I can, because it's the best and easiest decision I've ever made.
She was a great mascot. She was Wally the Wolf. Yes.
I was the original mascot. I was a student ambassador. I have a full scholarship at FRANU. So I was a Franciscan scholarship recipient. I was secretary of SGA. I tutor on campus. This is my 3rd year tutoring, I think. And I'm in Student Nurses Association as the event coordinator. So I am always doing something.
It sounds like they're going to be rigging it to where you're just not able to graduate. They're going to have to keep you around.
I think that's what happened, They're spoiled.
You talked earlier about getting out early. I think they're like, how can we delay? We got to put she's got to do some more. We'll figure, she's got 1 more year. We're not letting her out.
Yeah, well, there's more where she came from. I'm here to tell you.
Oh, yeah.
There's only one Kaylin, but we've been fortunate that, you get students that really know how to engage. And that's what I wish more students would understand, is that when you go to school, make use of every single opportunity, because you're learning so much more than the material that's on the syllabus. You're learning, I mean, Caitlin will look back and say, and I promise you this, because I've been in this business for 30 years, you'll look back and say, I learned at least as much of valuable material as Wally and SGA president and in Student Nursing Association as I did in calculus or pathophys. So it's how she deals with patients. She's learning in the formation part of FRANU. So we talk about education and formation. And that formation is where we try to get into the hearts of the students and say, all right, yeah, you're going to be a really good nurse, but what kind of really good nurse are you going to be? What's your purpose going to be? What's your motivation going to be? Because if it's just that nurse's bonus and the high demand pay, you're going to be a lousy nurse.
Or that's you could be I know some people, not nurses, but at their job, they are the best at what they do, but nobody wants to be around them. Like it's like, you know what, they are just a genius, but it's like they either missed the soft skills, they didn't learn how to interact, with other people. And it sounds like, you kind of getting that all the way across the board. So what would, Caitlin, what would you say? Like if there's, like we said, you'd said it, there's the LSU, there's the Southerns, there's the Southeasterns, there's no, Loyal, there's all these, we've got schools here. We've got, a lot of people say, as soon as I graduate, I'm getting out of Baton Rouge, or I'm going to get out of here. I want to go to, some big, why would they, what's the hook? Like, hey, before you go and do that, go take a look at FRANU.
I think that my biggest takeaway with this is like I didn't see it for myself. Like I knew I was coming to get an education somewhere, but I really discovered personal branding. Instead of saying like, oh, I have to go to class or I have to go volunteer, it's I get to volunteer or I get to help. So it's like you really develop that vocational mindset. It's not just a job. It's not just a career. It's not just a paycheck. It's actual people that you get to help. You get to learn from great people who have great experience. And it's not just in one specific field. It really covers all aspects, especially of the Franciscan core values. Like at first I was like, why are they drilling this in my head? But then afterwards you realize it's like, because this is the type of character and nurse I want to be, and bedside manner, especially, your patients know that. Like they know if you're having a bad day or if you don't really care about what you're doing. And some of them will say like, how are you doing? Or are you in a bad mood? So it's important to really care about what you're doing. And I really think that that's what FRANU sets apart from other universities. We may not get the football games and all that stuff, but we have lots of free T-shirts at every event. SGA does a great job of, getting that student core, where every month there's an event and everyone comes together, faculty, staff, and there's big ones. There's Turkey Bowl. There's Oktoberfest. The crawfish boil in April is my favorite because it's always on my birthday. So it's like a big birthday present. But, FRANU, man, is FRANU something. That's for sure. That's all I can say.
You have to take all the T-shirts and make a quilt out of it. I hear that's the thing to do at the end.
Yeah, so. Maybe so.
So, well, Quentin, we hadn't heard from you, and you're not stuck on mute, so I'm gonna come talk with you for a little bit. So, tell me, what are you doing over there at FRANU? For anybody, what's your other than like we all are these days? Everybody's I'm taking out trash, I'm cleaning desk, I'm doing this. What are you supposed to be working primarily on?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm a member of the board of trustees. I'm very honored to be a part of that. And on the board of trustees, you really are working with Dr. Holland and the leadership team to ensure that students like Halen are having the type of experience that she's having. That's really what it's all about. It's having young people who come to school, they spend 4, 5, 6 years, and on the other side, they are productive, younger young adults who are going about the world with a certain amount of integrity, a commitment to selflessness, and exceeding confidence in their possibility. So that's what we're here as the board to try to make sure that we have the financial and the resources. So Brandon, kudos to your team for affording us this opportunity to continue to get the message out. So that's what we're focused on as a board of trustees.
Well, I had one of my questions, and I have to disclaimer it now with it's going to sound like I'm really ignorant, but the question was, what's the outlook and what's the demand, kind of for, healthcare professionals, like I think any other pre-COVID, that might sound like a normal question, but, I think it's, it's kind of probably an obvious, but at the same time, this is a spike like everything else,
Right.
where we're at, but it seems like, healthcare is always, it's not going to go away at any point in time.
Right.
It's there. We need it. But what do you see it as?
So it's a great question in that in my day job, I lead economic development in New Orleans. So I spend a lot of time thinking about what's happening with the economy, what's the demand on labor, what skills are required. And I think you made a great point earlier, is that there are a lot of people who are going to go into nursing, or there are a lot of people who are going to go to respiratory therapy, physical therapy, or occupational therapy. But do they have that ethic of care? Do they have that willingness to go the extra mile? Are they going to be that nurse that holds that phone up to that patient so that patient can FaceTime with his or her family? Are they going to go the extra mile? Are they going to try to always project optimism for patients who are dealing with some of the most difficult situations? And that's the difference between the type of graduate of FRANU relative to other schools. That's not to say anything different. It's just to say that a big part of the grading, a big part of the culture is that ethic of care. It's not be a nice person. It is a way of life. It's going harking back to St. Francis. I'll say I'm not Catholic, but I'm a person of faith. And Dr. Holland made it very clear in the beginning that, FRANU is about people who understand that ethic of care, that servant leadership, that desire to make humanity better and more open and available for everyone.
I think, in a previous life, I worked, in the IT business, and had some companies doing that. And, those people would call you, and say, this is broke, or this is what's wrong, and I'm making a point here. And you would have to sit there and listen. And I would explain to, staff, I'm like, look, well, they only call you. The only reason why they're calling us is they're not going to call and say, everything's great. Just thought we'd let you know, the server's working great today. I can get to every file. Just thought you might want to know, grab a late lunch if you need to. You don't get those calls. And in healthcare, and these nurses, and Kaylin, you meet people a lot of times potentially on what very well could be the worst day of their life, every day. And you do it in, it's from one room to the next room to the next room to the next room, and you gotta stand strong. You kind of got to shake it off. It's like, close the door. I'm going to leave that behind me, and I'm going to go, and it might be the worst, situation in, bed 6, but I got to go to bed 12, and I've got from 6 to 12 to shine this up and get in there and be, happy and excited. Because if you got a bunch of people, really upset and it's not going to get any better, and that speaks to what I think you're talking about. It's where we said you can be great, at your job, but if you don't have the personality where somebody wants to be around you, it's not the greatest thing, right? It's
absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, I'll say that there are a lot of people who are technically proficient, but because of that lack of social emotional intelligence or a lack of integrity, are underachieving or underemployed or unemployed. And that's not going to be the case with graduates at FRANU. They're going to be prepared not only to have the skills, but they're going to have the comportment where when Kaylin walks in, or she works with the team that she's about to go on as she begins her professional life, they know when they give her an assignment, they can just go to sleep easy at night. It's taken care of. Because she's going to raise her hand, and if she doesn't know, she's going to ask insightful questions in the beginning. She's not going to mislead people. She's going to always understand that there's hope, but she's not going to sugarcoat things, and she's going to be responsible. And that's not always easy at 20, 21, 22, 23. But it only becomes easy and apparent, I would think, and I wish I had this when I was at that age, when you are anchored by something bigger than yourself, when you're anchored by a focus on God, you're anchored by the focus on your fellow students and the faculty. And Kaylin made the great point in the beginning. It's a family. And that's what college is about. When you think about the meaning of even alma mater, it has to do with mother and family. And I think, and particularly in these times, that's the value that parents are looking for. That's the value that young people are looking for, as they're incurring debt and making major sacrifices. And that's why I think FRANU is the best kept secret, not only in the capital region, but the entire Gulf Coast, and I would argue in the Southeast, and if not the nation, because it's that type of ethic of care where you see young people transformed. That's incredibly valuable.
I think I would equate, in my mixed up brain, I fly airplanes, and when you're learning to fly, an airplane, they say any landing that you can walk away from is a good landing, but any landing you can use the plane again on is a great one, And so either way, you've landed the plane, it's good, but it sounds like you guys have, the great ones. You can keep using them, again. And so I don't know why that popped in my head there.
And this is why I feel strongly about partnering with employers and growing their own in a way that goes beyond technical proficiency, so that they can fill a spot, right? That whole approach that calls people human capital. We don't embrace that kind of language, because these are human beings. These are people's sons and daughters. They're not capital. But we feel that our students can add so much more value to organizations because of the fact that they are more than highly skilled professionals. Our mission statement says that we prepare these and we educate, inform Franciscan servant leaders. And the way that we do it is we prepare them to be highly skilled professionals. That's a given. Everybody does that. But we also prepare them to be integrated thinkers, which means they got to make connections and do some critical thinking and question whether or not something makes sense. And even though nurses and other healthcare professionals have protocols, sometimes those protocols aren't going to apply, and you have to ask some tough questions, right? So that's where the integrated thinking comes in. And then the idea of being we prepare them to be faith-filled citizens, which means that because of their faith and their understanding of what Kaylin called a vocation, a calling, there is an obligation and a privilege to serve in one's community. And that if you're lucky enough, your job encompasses that, right? But sometimes there's also things that we do in our lives, like, okay, so Quentin's service on the Board of Trustees is a manifestation of his faith-filled citizenship, because he's advancing the mission of a really fine university that contributes in a special way to the community. When Kaylin doesn't even wait till she graduates, every one of our students participates in a service learning experience that bears credit because it's embedded in a content course. So, for example, while the students learn in biology, they are performing service learning projects within a partner organization in the community. So maybe it's in one of the elementary schools, and part of their service learning is to teach biological exploration and do, experiments with small children, and they learn the scientific method by, making Play-Doh or something. So they're then they have to reflect, and through what they've learned in their intro to theology classes and their ethics classes, what did you observe in your service learning? How did this express the Franciscan core values? What did you learn in terms of the human experience? Good, bad, and ugly. That's how we build those faith-filled citizens. But they're also the integrated thinkers, because they're taking what they've learned in the classroom and they're integrating it with an experience in the community, typically with young people or other folks, maybe seniors, who really are going to thrive due to that connection.
And you mentioned that service learning. I've noticed, at least for myself, in things, if I'm learning, like I said, if it was with an airplane, I may not fully have learned something yet, but if I try to teach what I've learned to someone else, or like a smaller version of it, I end up learning it myself a little bit better. It's
I
like
want to piggyback on it about my experience with service learning. And because you asked me earlier what sets FRANU apart, or why should I encourage other students to come here, is because service learning, there you go to homeless shelters, you go to council on aging, which is a facility for elderly in the community, and they get free meals, they get their bingo, their yoga. There's different places that you can go. And during my experience, I did go to council on aging. I volunteer at Mary Bird Cancer Center. I did Sunrise Senior Living, and from each one I learned something, and I fell more in love with why I chose FRANU and really just the career path. So that's what sets FRANU apart, is that real hands-on actual experience. It's not just a section in your textbook, it's real life.
It sounds like that would even help, and that's kind of FRANU in themselves, a way of helping you after school. You know people at Mary Bird Perkins now, people at the Council on Aging. So you've got relationships, and it's kind of like, where do I want to go? Who do I like the best at this point?
And that's why we have 100% placement.
That's an impressive number.
Yes.
So Quentin, you talked on some partnerships, and I think you're on some of these, strategically, kind of some of these partnerships. I know I've seen a couple of them in the community, but you guys are doing a lot in the community, but you also got, these partnerships that are bringing more value to the community. Can you tell me a little
Sure. Yeah, and I would love Dr. Holland and Kaylin to talk about it as well, but I think there are really three things. So first is really a partnership to expose more of the next generation who are interested in having a unique Franciscan learning experience to the fact that FRANU is here. So Kaylin mentioned being a Franciscan scholar, and we have other programming that Dr. Holland can talk about that affords young people who are serious about their faith walk, their Christian walk, to really participate in an academic setting with like-minded young people. So that's really a part of making sure that the community has that next generation. FRANU also works closely with Crystal Ray, the high school in Baton Rouge, and provides an opportunity for those young people to have exposure. Second, in addition to the partnership with Our Lady of the Lake, but FRANU is also working with BRCC and others to try to provide opportunities for graduates, because we know that there's always been a persistent nursing shortage for a variety of different reasons that go beyond the scope of this podcast. But FRANU is working to try to alleviate that and really equip the next generation of our nursing professional with tools, as you alluded to deal with the fact that they go through a lot of trauma just in their day-to-day walk as a nurse, and how to handle that so you don't get burnt out, so you can continue to find that joy, that purpose, that God-given purpose that Christ put inside of you that led you to that. And how can you keep, getting and drawing to him and getting that inexhaustible supply of energy to go back and forth. And I think the last thing that I'm very excited about is, we're building St. Francis Hall. So we're going to build a front door. So we're going to be much more visible to the rest of the community than we have been historically. Historically, we've just been about keeping your head down, training great, people, but haven't been so focused on buildings and all those edifices. But, when you've got something good, when you have 100% placement, you deserve to have somewhere where students like Kaylin and the next generation can congregate. They can support each other. They can have a sense of community in a physical space. But also that physical space has to be reflective and anchored in the values of the Franciscan ministry. And so very excited about St. Francis Hall. It's going to be a gateway to FRANU. It's going to be a gateway on that Essen Lane, Perkins corridor. So we're very excited about that. And I know Dr. Holland can talk to you further about it. But those are some of the partnerships. And the last thing I would say, I have to put a plug in for economic development, or else my friends in economic development would kick me out of the fraternity or the sorority, as it were, is that, look, when you have the most important thing that we in economic development, people who are marketing a particular place, in my case is New Orleans, Adam Knapp Markets, Baton Rouge. If you talk to Adam, or you talk to Mayor President Sharon Weston Broom, or you talk to Governor Edwards, or you talk to Don Pearson, who's the secretary at LED, the one thing that everybody will tell you, to a man, to a woman, is talent. And it's not that talent that's technically proficient. It's talent that has judgment,
leadership,
wisdom, and integrity. And we're seeing every day, under the pressure of COVID and isolation and the disconnect from normalcy, you're seeing people from the highest levels of our society crumble under that pressure because they're not anchored. And people who go through FRANU and graduate and participate and get everything out of it, like Kaylin have done, they're anchored. There's a substance there. There's a bottom to them that's not going to be shocked. That's not going to be shaken as they go through the crucibles of life. And that's just life. This pandemic, this is only for a season. But when you have a certain anchoring and connecting to God and to Christ, and you understand whose you are, you have a bottom that will not allow you to be shaken.
You've got a foundation to build on. That's not going to get shaken. That's not going to fall. That's what I was here. The building. And we jumped over this, and you said it real quick, and I meant to bring it up in the beginning for anybody. Anybody doesn't know, you guys are off of Essen Lane. And you're tucked away and kind of hidden, right now. And most people don't know, like, I'm sure somebody's probably going to be watching this the whole time until we're this far in going, well, where the heck is the place? I've never seen it.
We hear that question a lot. It's, we're scattered really in 12 disparate buildings, all of which are converted medical office buildings, none of which were ever meant to house educational functions. And as adaptable as we have been over 100 years, we have made wherever we can usable. And when you get inside some of the buildings, you would be amazed at what is being done and how creatively resourceful folks have been to make the most out of much less substandard, much less than optimal physical space. So it is past time that FRANU begin to build a campus, a true campus. And it starts with a front door, as Quentin so eloquently called it, and that's St. Francis Hall. And St. Francis Hall has been planned and talked about and debated for too many years. The university is in a position now to be able to, have the resources to service the financing on a 74,000 square foot building that will touch every student from certificate level student clear through to the doctoral level, clinical and non-clinical students. It will house our simulated environment teaching hospital, which is a high fidelity, very top notch, high speed facility that does pretty remarkable things. You'd think you are actually in a clinical setting, and it will have an outpatient floor and an inpatient floor. We do interdisciplinary scenarios so that the respiratory students, the X-ray students, the rad tech students, the nurses, the PAs, the physical therapists, all work together on a case. We'll have ethical issues that we'll have to address. The communications faculty will be in there to possibly to evaluate the student's ability to clearly and honestly communicate bad news to a patient. They get to experience that. And it's such a real environment that I've actually seen a student in a psych situation where they had a psych patient who was, and the psych patient is what we call a standardized patient. It's somebody that volunteers and they learn how to act and how to portray the symptoms of. And so we had a psych patient who was really good, and she scared the living daylights out of a nursing student, so that when the nursing student had to go get the meds, she just sat down in the medicine room and lost it. And the teacher said, in the then they all went back to the debriefing room, and the teacher said, "Now, this is where you want this to happen, right? This is where, because she's going to be okay. And now we're going to work through this again." But it's like when you do a dress rehearsal when you're performing and you completely screw it up and there's no audience. Okay, fine. And then you feel that much more comfortable when you perform in front of an audience. So it is when they're in the real clinical situation. Our our simulation director will say, "You know what? It's okay if the dummy dies."
Yeah.
We don't want to lose the real person. So this new building will have the very best material for students to work with in these interdisciplinary scenarios to prepare them the very best they can be prepared as whole people in a clinical situation. There'll also be a chapel there, the San Damiano Cross, which is very much the signature cross for our for Franciscans, will be a center point of the building. So it makes it very clear we are Franciscan. Student life kinds of things, the clubs, all the organizations that Caleb was involved in, all of those functions will be in that building. It is something that we very much are looking forward to, and it will be a major step toward the future of FRANU, just the beginnings, and a very clear signal that we are adapting to the needs of our community. The building itself will be an adaptable building, one that has the kind of technology that will respond to the ongoing and changing needs of healthcare.
That's amazing. So where is this building going to be?
It'll be on the corner of Brittany and Picardy. So we're struggled in there, between Hennessy and Picardy. And then there's a couple of the cross streets, Dides, and I forget what maybe it's.
And this is getting started soon.
As we get an agreement on our financing, so we're hoping that we have a shovel in the ground within a year. We got delayed significantly because of COVID, but that
simulation will be awesome. to be
No, we
able to
have
go
it
through.
already.
I've seen.
It's just that it's crammed into a building that was converted from a medical office building.
It's still awesome. Like,
It is awesome.
It's,
it's already awesome.
the fact it's, I go back to my plane analogy. A buddy of mine's a fighter pilot, and he goes, you do all this training, and he goes, the scariest time in your life is the first time they put you in the jet, because they don't build them in two-seater. You've got to just know it, and
Right.
you go. So to be able to practice in that environment is amazing. So
I'll never forget the first time I had to knock on a patient's door and take vital signs. I was so nervous. And so that simulation, it really kind of helped you build the confidence, not saying overconfident whatsoever, because every door is different. But the simulation is awesome. Like, there's one that will give birth, they will cry, they will have an actual code blue. So you really learn everything in these simulation hospitals.
And when the students deal with their first code, you can really see, whoops, this one needs a little more work, because
I'll never forget the mental health patient. Like, you think that you know therapeutic communication, and then you get to it and you're like, what am I supposed to say to this person to, one, not them make more angry than what they are, or two, make them want to hurt themselves. Like, it's awesome.
And interestingly enough, in the non-clinical programs, we try to mirror the same sort of experience. So we have a theology major as a Catholic institution. And unlike any other theology program, our students right from the get-go are in ministry. They immediately start, they're appropriately supervised, but they immediately start working within the diocese. And they're constantly, as they learn the theology, they are constantly reflecting on, okay, how is that manifested in practice? Or how does this, what does this theoretical concept have to do with the fact that I had this kid in my youth group who's watching porn? Well, here's what, here are the theological foundations. And then here's how you can meet that young man in your youth group where he is, and help him to understand the beauty of the creation that he is, and how he is essentially, putting himself in true danger when he is looking at that stuff. So they're just learning, again, very much in a clinical way, how to be youth ministers and religious educators, theology teachers and religion teachers in the Catholic schools, but through that sort of hands-on experience. And we do the same with our business students. They're immediately out in their partner organizations working for Blue Cross Blue Shield or one of our health system partners, doing things so that they can actually learn what they're, experience what they're learning in the books.
And I guess that's where the partnership with Cristo Rey comes in. I know that's how they do one day a week out in the field, which I think is amazing, because
right.
I think that's so important, because I know some people that are just really book smart, but you put them in a room, an office with people, and you're just kind of like, you don't get it. There's, like, I had to tell somebody the other day, they were talking about, well, this needs to happen and so needs to do this, this, and this. And it was like, that's, you got to do a little politicking here to do this the right way. You got to ease this, it's not just, you can't go in there and start beating your chest. And they're like, well, no, but that's the way it says. Look, it's in the policy. And I'm like, yeah, but you can't do that. And they're like, why not? And I'm like, it's not all, I was always told, my mother always told me, it's not all black and white, there's shades of gray. Right. So, well, guys, this has been awesome. I want to see, I'd love to hear how the building, comes along. I'd love to, get updates, see where things go. Kayla, come back, tell us where you ended up, when it's all said and done, if they let you out. It doesn't sound like they're going to.
She's going to bring us more students like her.
So, Quentin, I appreciate it, man. Sounds like they got you running, a little crazy as well. Got a day job and got, to find some more partnerships and tie all this stuff together. And I'm sure that being on the board of trustees makes that building project a little bit higher priority for you. So
exactly. I mean, the only thing first of all, I want to thank you, Brandon, and your entire team, and Kaylin and Dr. Holland for letting me hang out with them. But I think it's crucial for people to understand that the integrity and the fact that you have people who know, when you meet someone that's a part of the FRANU family, you can trust the word of that individual. And I think that is critically important in this period, because there are a lot of people who are out there who are smart, who are thoughtful, but don't have that integrity. And there are very few things that you can hang your hat on. You can hang your hat on the word of a FRANU graduate. And I think that's our staff.
It sounds like what you guys have done. If obviously this can't be the sole, acid test, but it really sounds like, with 100% placement, we've talked to you, the passing rates are through the roof. It's almost, I don't know if I'm going to say this the right way, but if your resume is stamped with a FRANU, that means something more than another school, because it's all the things we've talked about here, to where you've got employers that can kind of look through and go, oh, FRANU, put that on. I'm not even going to finish read. I'm just going to put it on the short list. Call them in for an interview. That's all I needed to see, at that point, right?
But that's why it's so important that we blow the lid off of this best kept secret, and why I'm grateful to you for this opportunity to get the word out, why we count on our trustees and our students to share everything that they know that is FRANU, the value that we bring to the community, and if we can get that blow that lid entirely off, imagine what more we could do, because there are so many folks that don't know about us who we could serve, and whose children or whose spouse could have the kind of experience that Kaylin's having, and then we'll go out there and make a difference, and one that is desperately needed.
One question before we wrap, because I know you guys have more important things to do than to talk to me, but you mentioned a spouse. Is there an opportunity for somebody listening to this? I picture, it's the mom, or it's, the dad, I'm picturing my mom, walking around the lake, and they're kind of listening to this and going, I want to give it a shot, but I can't just walk away from my day job, and I've got a family. Is there opportunity for them? Is there some way they can kind of do both at the same time? Like if I'm working, everybody seems like in South Louisiana is in oil and gas, right? You either know somebody who works at the plant, they're an operator at the plant, or they're out to get a job at the plant, or they're trying, somebody's at the plant and goes, I'm just done, or God, I feel horrible. I had to get a car the other day, and I was talking to a guy, and their guy selling the car. He's like, yeah, I'm here 6 days a week from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. I'm like, oh my God, that's just horrible. Like,
well, what's interesting, it's interesting you would say that. One of the fastest growing segments of the population among our students are people who already have a degree, post-baccalaureate folks, or people who may have an associate's degree, or at least have some college, and either they're transferring or they're re-entering the school environment. Our average age is 27, actually. And that has a lot to do with the number of graduate programs, but also the re-entry population. And depending on what their personal life situation is and what program they're taking, there are opportunities to go entirely online. So somebody who's an RN but doesn't have their bachelor's can take the RN to BSN program. It's entirely online. The bachelor's in business administration is online. The master's in health administration is entirely online. More and more of the programs are migrating in that direction because we're already in that space, and we found that we can do that.
And that could be a path for somebody, right? They could flip and say, I'm going to do this online, and then I'm going to get into this, the business side of the house. And
Right.
then maybe they're able to make that transition to a new job. And then that new job in healthcare, they might say, look, I want to make another, this was, and that provider, that company would say, well, yes, we want, if you want to go all the way to nursing, we'll help you, we'll work with you, because that's going to benefit us at the end of the day. So just because somebody's
but we'll also work with folks, somebody's listening and they click on www.franu.edu and want to talk to somebody. We will approach it not so much as, oh, okay, apply for admissions. We will talk about, what is it that you think you might be being called to do? What are your interests? What's the overlap between what really gets you excited, what's your passion, what you think you've got aptitude, you've got ability, and 3, where there's a need. And the greatest overlap among those 3 things are what we call your vocation. And we do some counseling with students or potential students to help them to determine, oh, okay, that might be what I'm interested in. It isn't limited to where's the demand and how much can you get paid. Those are important, but they're not going to be terribly meaningful unless, 1, you have a passion, 2, you have the ability, and 3, there's a need out there. Again, that threefold overlap really helps you to discern, that's my vocation. And I'll tell you a story about a young lady that I talked to during COVID, who was a graduate from LSU in mass communications and lost her job in New Orleans in COVID, and was thinking that, they need nurses. I can get a job nursing. So it was the job that was motivating her. And she went to see what it would take. And boy, it would have been a long haul with what would transfer, what wouldn't transfer. And she was going to have to be on the waiting list for certain classes. And I thought, I'm just going to, let me call this kid. So I called her. Now, again, there's not too often a president of the university is going to call an applicant, but, I just thought she was about my daughter's age, just lost her job, trying to figure out what she's going to do with her life. If this was my kid, I'd want somebody to talk to me about something more than just, how do you get on the wait, how do you move up the wait list on these courses? So I called her and we talked, and we had the conversation about vocational discernment and the why behind her interests. And it turns out that actually she wanted to be a physical therapy assistant, which is a very, very rigorous associate's degree at 80 something credits, believe it or not. And a very, can be a very rewarding career if that's what it is that brings you passion. And as she learned about the different options for her, I had her talk to the different professors, program directors, and doggone if she didn't write me a letter, an old-fashioned pen to paper letter with a stamp, an envelope, and everything, to tell me, thanks for having that conversation. I am in the PTA program and so loving it. Am driven to this line of work. Love my CAT courses, love my faculty, have met some great students. And it's a whole new start for this year. We're getting more and more students in that kind of a situation that are having just a crisis of discernment and what do I do now? So we have to do more than just process their applications. We've got to chat with them and help them to determine where they're going.
I pulled up while you're talking because maybe it makes sense, maybe it doesn't, but there was a quote from, and Quentin, you might like this as well in the economic side of the house, a little bit from Steve Jobs. It says, some people say give the customer what they want, but that's not my approach. Our job is to figure out what they're going to want before they do. I think Henry Ford once said, if I asked a customer what they wanted, they would have told me a faster horse. People don't know what they want until you show it to them. That's why I never rely on market research. Our task is to read things that are not yet on the page.
Yep.
So it kind of made me think about it when you're talking, like, let's not, and I tell that to everybody, or say it to kind of draw the line, as you were saying, it's pick up a phone, make a call. You're not stuck, and it's not always black and white. There are shades of gray, and there might be some ways. It might take you a little bit of a way to get there, but you'll be happier at the end, to make the call. Maybe you'll be the lucky one. You get the call from, Dr. Holland, and she'll tell you what you need to be doing. So, well, guys, look, I appreciate all the time that you've given to me here. This has been super informative. I hope somebody listening to this, decides that, enough's enough. I'm tired of doing, this just job. I think it's a cliche, but as everybody says, you really need to love what you do, and you don't have to work a day in your life. But
Right.
give people a chance, whether it's, first starting out or going back, and this is right here in the middle of town. People don't realize it. Like you said, big kept secret. Not for long. We'll get a building up, pretty soon. But for now, it's FRANU.edu, and you're a phone call away, and you're probably passing them at least twice a week as you drive around town. So you just didn't know it. So anything I'm forgetting, or before I let you guys get back to the real life and important things, other than talking to some guy on Zoom? So.
No,
Thank
we've enjoyed this. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. Thank you very much. We'll talk again